Welcome back to another episode of Becoming a Developer, and I'll pretty much pick up where I left off last time, which was before spring break. Pretty much a professor stepped into our project, and then I went up to confront him about it, and then he pretty much says, oh, well, I didn't mean it on purpose, and then gave me a half-hearted apology, which was honestly so frustrating. I was just like, whatever, dude, I can't even, whatever. But in this week's coming back from spring break class, we are focusing on stains and stenciling of our concrete forms, and these are the stains that we plan to use. So we picked a corner in our concrete squares, and then we went ahead and cut it with a diamond blade and with a grinder, and then used these stencils that our concrete professor had, as well as that little kind of gun that you see there. That's a concrete engraver. Really fun and really cool, and it pretty much stamps out the surface level of the concrete to reveal what's underneath. And then you can use it with these stencils to create different cool designs. So that's the design that we want to use for this particular square, because all the stains we did were kind of autumn based. And then first though, this is our practice round. And so we practice with the engraver tool, both the big one as well as the pen. And then as you can see here, it's kind of like just chipping away at that top layer of concrete to create the actual design itself. So I went ahead and did this one. So I did a nice little outline, and then as over here, that's where my partner is going to go ahead and do her outline as well. So honestly, the best way to think about it is like you're giving the concrete a tattoo, which is really cool. So it was definitely fun. It was interesting to see how like the harder you press on it, the darker the actual stencil comes out. So that was just definitely something that we had to keep in mind and like aware of to not overdo it essentially, but super fun. Then heading over to my framing class is week 10. So let me show you what I'm up to this week, or so far today, April 15th, for carpentry class. So today was pretty much assembling our walls. So my team, we each broke out into teams, and this is like the aftermath, but we took this wall and did pretty much the studs that we had already laid out down here, which you can see, like that's part of the stud layout. And then my team nailed those in to create this kind of little mini wall. And then once we had finished that, we then went ahead and assembled this big wall. It kind of got a little messy. This is our king stud that we're using, but we're actually using the channel as part of the king stud at the same time. It was weird, but we did that because our header, which we allotted to be 5.5 inches above the rough opening, or above the door width, was too big, so it wasn't fitting. It was actually like cutting into each stud on each side. So we had to essentially shift this whole thing over and make the channel the king stud, if that makes sense. That was the biggest challenge. And then I'm also running on 4.5 hours of sleep, so bear with me. But after that was done, we nailed everything else together. We're obviously not done, but yeah, that's an update. Today is wall raising day. I went ahead and captured all of this on a time lapse, but essentially we're finishing one wall, and then as an entire class, moving and raising all those walls together, which was very cool. It took a lot of communication to make sure everyone was moving in the right direction. And then once the walls were raised, we had a one person, which was me, and two other people who pretty much locked the things together. And then we went ahead and squared and plumbed the entire structure. After we raised the walls in my carpentry class of this house, we went ahead and put in the top plates right there, and then we made sure that wherever there was a butt wall, that top plate extended over to the through wall so that it could all tie together. And then yeah, we put all that together. There was one team that did all the cripple studs above the doors and windows. And then another team did the squaring of the actual house on the slab, which was a little bit difficult because the slab is too small. But yeah, that's what we did this week in carpentry class. Meanwhile, stepping into the 2-story structure for my roofing class, we mounted our ridge. So this is what it looks like. I'm gonna dip under here. And get out of the sun. So this is our ridge for our gable roof on the second story. And so we didn't have one long piece, so we had to, what they would call sister these two pieces together. So you can see we have like 3/4 inch plywood that was nailed, or I guess, yeah, it was nailed on either side to kind of hold those two pieces together. And then we started putting up the rafters 24 inches on center. And we got one side done. And so our next week, we're gonna finish the other side and hopefully do sheathing. It was a bit weird because this building is not, it's like 12'5" on this side. So from here to here, but then on the other side, it's like 12 feet, 4.5 inches. So the building kind of curves. And so that was kind of tricky cutting the rafters, but made it work. And then we have those clips as well. Yeah. Still slow progress. So I started doing the drywall this, all this drywall. Got it done, started mudding, taping, tried paper tape in the corner, and then for these seams, just the other tape. And then the rest of my team did the hardiebacker and put up these boards for our drop-in tub. So now, because we're running on downtime, we're thinking fake toilet goes here. We're actually thinking of nixing the kitchen and just having and focusing on the bathtub and the shower. So that's our goal. While we did get to start on that a little bit, the professor did go ahead and pull us for a couple of tile demonstrations, which is as follows.
When you get close to the end, you want to slow down, because if you go too fast, a lot of times, especially on the type of tile or so we do all the seams. Oh, it's not that sticky. We do all the seams, and this is not going to be moving around because it's screwed on, right? Yeah. So we'll do all the seams, and I kind of leave it like that, and I'll mix my thin set, and as I'm coming along with my tile, I'll just kind of smear that, like I'll cover it as I'm coming. I don't necessarily go around and do all the seams like I would do with drywall. I'm doing it as I'm going. So again, I grew up with one of these and one of these, right? And this is what I like using, both of these. So with this one I'm scooping, and this one I'm I used to kind of just smear like that, like in different areas. And then we can get this one. And depending on how thick you want it, for our class, it doesn't really matter. I think you can do whatever you want. But just consider that you want it pretty thick, and they do sell them in separate depths here on these little teeth. So I tend to have a little bit of an angle when I do this. So just try to keep it consistent. Because you can imagine if you're doing this a lot, and then you go into another one and you're doing this, you're gonna have a thicker versus a thinner. So I would say just keep it consistent. If you're trying to be intentional of spacing, we have spacers. We have different thicknesses here. Right, we have at 16, this is an 1/8, yeah, an 1/8, and this is more like 3/16, and this is a 1/4 inch. So again, when we place this, I tend to do like a cross, so I know it's evenly spread, right? And then again, if I was doing the tape, I'm just kind of covering it up there. And that's why I'm saying I don't necessarily come in beforehand, I just kind of do it as I'm going. And it's just tape right in the way. So when I have this, I grew up doing this, I would always get it wet. And I think that, I was just doing that this weekend. With brick though, with block. I think when it's wet, it tends to not absorb and dry this too quickly. Does that make sense? Because if this has been sitting in the sun all day or whatever, and it's super dry, and if it's porous, so once you place it, it's gonna just suck all the water up. So I always kind of quickly sink them when they were like really dense materials. I remember I was a little kid, I would start putting him in there, and I was pulling him out like when my dad would set it. So I would be like doing like a routine where I'm kind of, you know, so we come here, and then I'll put some here as well. Depending on how big your tile is.
Back better.
Yeah. This one already has like a little bit of a like a groove, like ridges or grooves. So we just kind of try to keep it kind of consistent. Sometimes when they're really big pieces, I'll do like 4 plops, and then I'll still come back with this, right? Smooth it out, and then we place it. And you don't have to get it perfect. As long as you get most of it and you're pretty consistent and it's pretty dense, you're gonna place it, right? And since you're gonna squish it, so you don't have to be like exact, but you wanna get it pretty consistent. If you have a lot of voids in there, that's when you get cracking too. Because if somebody comes with heels and they're dancing, whatever, and they hit a void, then you can break, right?
This is probably one of my more favorite classes because we did get a hands-on demonstration with the tile. So definitely appreciated. And it was, I mean, you get the gist. Then closing out the week in my concrete and foundations class, in this class we decided to work on concrete stairs. So this is us building the forms for the stairs. We built a 3x3, a 3x2, and a 3x1, and then we went ahead and stacked them on top of each other. Now the biggest thing I learned about concrete stairs is they're not always filled completely of concrete. And so it's very common to take large aggregates like these cinder blocks and actually put them within the stairs themselves to kind of fill in that space, and then leave room around the edges in order to create that complete concrete look. So that's our plan here. This is us putting calcium chloride into the mix so that it will dry faster and we won't be out here watching concrete dry all day. As you can see, this mix is a little bit too soupy. So we are adding more soil into it in order to stiffen it up a little bit more, because again, if it's too wet, it'll take too long to dry. And it was actually very helpful in this class because I think having done this for so long now, you kind of get a feel for like when concrete is too dry or when concrete is too wet, and like when you need to add more to the mix. So taking in a different point of view, essentially. Here it's better, but it's still a little bit on the soupy side. And then here we added a little bit too much, and so you can see it's super dry. But anyways, once we finally got that right, we went ahead and poured in the concrete and filled it in. And now we're just hitting it with the trowel in order to make it a smoother finish, and then letting it dry. And this was the final finished product. Well, not that one, because that was the other team's. But this is the final concrete steps that we did. So you can clearly see in the lines of the forms that we did. It still came out pretty well. And then we used mortar to fill up some of the gaps, like right here, right here. All in all, I feel like these past 2 weeks have been extremely productive, and I can't wait to show you more of what I learned in these last weeks of school. Until the next episode, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned.